Spinoza was of Spanish and Portuguese ancestry. I think his Portuguese ancestry. And one of his neighbors described him as a man with a black complexion and curly hair. So the great Jewish philosopher was a black Jew. What?
The early Greeks, the ancient.
Oh, they had a strong mixture of African blood. Everybody did, because since the human race came from Africa, according to law in this country, if you have just a small amount of African blood, that makes you a Negro. Well, if you take that literally, then even Reagan is a Negro, because if you trace his ancestry back far enough, you go to Africa. So even Reagan has African blood.
I'd like to first of all thank you for being here as sort of one of our elder statesmen and elder scholars, and thank you for coming to Lausanne and sharing your time and with us. The question I have for you is something that struck me in your introductory comments when you say that people like Arthur Schomburg and J.A. Rogers and people like that were your mentors.
That's right.
And I'm wondering, through the 60 some odd years of your career as a scholar, what has been the most encouraging development in terms of black people becoming more in tune with our history?
Well, the most encouraging development I had was when I stood on street corners at night in Harlem and heard Dr. Hubert H. Harrison lecture. And then I would sometimes go to the YMCA, he'd be lecturing there, and sometimes to the library, and sometimes he stood on the steps of the sub-treasury on Wall Street right opposite J.P. Morgan's office. Morgan was probably at the window listening to him. And Harrison gave a lecture down there on Wall Street one day, and the police had to rope off the street because he was lecturing to an audience of 11,000 people. Now here was an unusual black man who fought for the freedom of everybody. He left the Socialist Party because the white socialists were racist. He joined the Garvey movement because he said that the socialists said class first and they practiced race first. And Garvey advocated race first, and that's what he believed in. So he said, I don't believe in class first, I believe in race first. So he joined the Garvey movement. And Harrison was a man, he didn't get into history because he didn't allow white people to flatter him. You have a lot of our people, if a big white man gets up and says some nice words about him, they're tickled to death. So Harrison went to a white YMCA in Brooklyn, New York, and the secretary got up and said, Dr. Harrison is a great scholar. He has a black face, but his heart is white. So Harrison banged his fist on the rostrum. Sir, I demand a retraction. I'll have you understand that my heart is just as black as my face. And Harrison, to show you what a great education he was, he would be lecturing in a library in Harlem on 135th Street, and half of the audience would be students from Columbia University taking notes, because they were getting more from Harrison than they were from the professors up at the university. So Harrison gave a lecture, I think it was at a library, either the library or the YMCA one night. I wasn't there, but some of the people who heard the thing told me the story. Harrison was giving one of his scholarly lectures, and a young man was sitting in the audience, and when he got through, he asked Harrison a silly question, and Harrison gave him a silly answer. The young man lost his temper. Now see here, Dr. Harrison, you are not talking to a fool. I am a highly educated young man. I finished Harvard last year. Harrison says, I beg to differ, young man. You did not finish Harvard because Harvard is still there. He says, you didn't say what you meant to say. You told us tonight that you finished Harvard on commencement day. He says, now the day you finish school is called commencement day. Are you trying to tell us that you finished on commencement day? Well, of course, the young man blew his top and walked out of the meeting. He wasn't going to stand for that sort of thing. So another night, he's on a street corner on 7th Avenue. I think it was 7th Avenue and 135th Street. And a young white man walked into the meeting. Harrison would generally have anywhere from 100 to 300 people standing around while he talked. This white man comes in, and Harrison was lecturing on evolution. And he was telling about how the human race evolved from apes in Africa more than 1 million years ago. Therefore, we are the original race. And this white man waited for the question period. Dr. Harrison, you say that the first men were black and they evolved from apes in Africa. Is that the reason why black people look more like apes than white people do? Harrison says, you've got it entirely wrong, young man. White people look much more like apes than we do. He says, and I'm not asking you to go to a library and do research. All I want you to do is to use your eyes. Go to a zoo and go to the cages where they have the apes. He says, and you won't find one black ape there. All the apes have fair complexions. They have thin lips. They have Anglo-Saxon noses. And they have straight hair. So if you want to get somebody that looks like an ape, get a white man.
I have another question if I might step up, because apparently when you speak, the earth moves. The question I have for you is, do you have any ideas on approaches that progressive African people need to take in order to get our youth more interested in their history? Because, as you said, our people don't read anymore. And if our people are not reading and not getting information, it gives them a sense of value of who they are. And I'd just like to know what your opinion on that subject would be.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. Because there's only one way they can do it, and if they do it, we're not going to be around very long. In other words, any group of people, if they're going to survive, they have to have an economic foundation. There's a block in Chicago where there are 7 storefront churches on one side of the street and 8 storefront churches